Devastator is quite possibly the easiest, or at least the most straightforward boss fight in Combat Cycle for DC Dark Legion. And today I'm doing an update video to the original Devastator Combat Cycle guide that I made a couple of months ago. Not much has changed on how this boss fight works, but I do want to show some footage of me doing phase 2 of the boss fight. And we'll talk about general strategies and thought processes around how to beat Devastator. But again, it's one of those kind of like typical MMO style, like tank and spank bosses where you definitely need a couple of upfront folks who can take a brunt of the damage while you just push as much damage into the boss as possible. So the kit is really, really straightforward for Devastator, and it's the exact same kit as phase 1, but just with the phase 2 power up as in effect. So Devastator is going to become significantly stronger. He's going to have increased attack, increased physical defense, increased spiritual defense, and there's also going to be a 30% bonus to effect resistance. So any of the negative effects that you were able to impose on Devastator are going to have a higher chance of being resisted. The way this fight works is there's just one ability that Devastator has. It's called Ejected, and essentially what happens in the actual fight is you'll actually be able to see it coming, but there's just kind of like a circle that expands on the screen, and then he does this kind of AoE, and it's really, really powerful towards the end of the fight. If you're not careful and you don't have decent healing and you're not well geared and transmuted, you're probably going to end up having a few people die in the fight. But overall, just very simple boss fight, and you can really use a wide range of your roster against this. So pretty much any team is going to be somewhat viable against Devastator. There are some champions that are going to fare much better. So any of your high single target damage champions, and we'll go over to our roster and take a look. So high single target damage champions like Superman are going to be incredibly good against this fight. Nightwing would definitely be in that category. You've got your Green Arrow for some of your free-to-play rosters. Black Adam is pretty good against Devastator. For sure, Sinestro is going to be good. We've got Robin is going to be good against Deathstroke. Robin is going to be good against Devastator. And then Deathstroke is going to be good against Devastator. We got a couple of new champions in the game as well as of the making of this video. Ra's al Ghul and his daughter Talia. And I think both of them will have decent potential to do well against Devastator as well. Again, any high single target damage dealers are going to fare well against the boss. Some other notable champions from a support angle that are going to be really good against Devastator. You're going to be using your Cyborg, Batgirl, your Captain Cold, pretty significantly against this boss. I think also Zatanna for your spiritual damage dealers. She's going to be pretty good. And a couple of other notable champions. I do think Joker can do really well against Devastator because there's not much. He does have the effect resistance, but you have like effect accuracy with your Joker, and he's going to be putting all of those debuffs or damage over time effects onto Devastator, which can really ramp up his damage. I think probably people who invest heavily in Justice League Dark are going to be using their Constantine against Devastator. He's kind of an AoE champion, so you're going to lose some efficiency by using an AoE champion like Constantine against Devastator, but you can still do a ton of damage with a heavily invested roster. And I think the same goes for Supergirl, who I have used to great effect against Devastator, especially when you pair him with support champion like Superboy. We can see what folks on server 204 are up to in Devastator. We definitely got, as I mentioned, you got a lot of Supermans here. You can see Nightwing is getting used in this roster here. We got another Nightwing. You can see a lot of these support champions that I mentioned that are getting utilized to kind of bolster some of these teams. Sekju's using his Superman family here. He's still waiting on that last red star for Superman. I was talking to him about that earlier this week. You can see my roster here. I'm also using Superman family and actually kind of inadvertently copying Sekju here. We'll probably take a look at what the Flash is able to do against this boss as well, where we're trying to, supercharge Supergirl's damage as much as we can. We've got a Deathstroke here. You're going to see a lot of Supermans, as I mentioned, Nightwings as well. We had a decent amount of people get Nightwing to yellow stars on 204, so seeing a lot of those. Unfortunately, not a lot of people invested heavily into Legion of Doom on our server, so a lot of us are waiting for the reruns there. But you do see a few Sinestros here in the blue star range that are able to do a decent amount of damage against this boss. And I want to take you to a couple of other servers so we can see what other servers across the spectrum of the game are doing. I can take you to a global launch server, and then I'll take you to a summer launch server, one that came out much after the game's initial release, and we'll see what everybody's up to. Okay, so first up we have a global launch server. This is server 217. And you can see a lot of those same champions that I mentioned are getting utilized here. There is a significant investment on the server in some of those Legion of Doom and Arkham champions. So you are going to see a ton of Jokers here. I mentioned how effective he can be against this boss. We've got some Supergirls, Superman family investment in here also. We got some Sinestros, some Purple Star Sinestros. It's good to see those. And let's go take a look at one of the summer launch servers as well. So we're on server 336 here, and you'll see a lot of those same champions that are getting utilized on this server. We've got a one red star Sinestro here. Good to see that. Again, a lot of the same champions that we talked about from the other servers are getting utilized here. Those 5 red Supermans are going to be incredibly effective. Your Jokers are going to be incredibly effective as well. We've got a decent amount of Constantines that are getting utilized here. Okay, so we've talked about the kit a little bit. We've talked about some of the champions that I think are most effective against the boss. We looked at some of the best scores across 3 different servers throughout the game's life cycle, I would say. So looked at my server 204, which is a soft launch or beta server. We looked at global launch, and we looked at the summer launch. And a lot of those same themes you can see are there for how to beat this boss. We're going to jump straight into a couple of battles here to close out the video. And the first one is going to be, you've already seen the scores for a couple of these Captain Cold and Superman family lineups. So I think what I will do is I'm going to take my Captain Cold out, and we're going to put in our Flash. And I just upgraded Flash to 2 purple stars. So I think that's going to give significant additional attack percentage to our roster here. So I think I should see some gains on the last time I did this strategy with Flash. But let's go ahead and run this and see how it goes. And we'll take a look at a couple of other comps as well with some of those other champions that I mentioned. Now, the general strategy here, I've mentioned this in other videos, you really need to supercharge Supergirl as quickly as possible. So we're going to, before we do that ult, we're going to find Crypto and use him one more time, and then we'll do the ult. So that's going to get us that next level of Krypton energy. And we'll keep using Superboy and Crypto as many times as we can here early on. I will go ahead and get Crypto one more ult a little bit faster. And we should be able to go Superman next. And then we can start, I think, ramping up our Supergirl attacks from this point. And basically, you're just going to, on cooldown with your Flash, you're going to use his ult to, you have to manually select Supergirl, otherwise he's going to target your Superboy every single time. But we'll just manually select our Supergirl every time her ult is on cooldown and we have Flash's ult up. Let's go ahead and immediately give that back to her. And based on the way her kit is designed and also the way her unique legacy piece works, the more times you cycle that ultimate, the more AoE damage she's going to be doing. You know, AoE is not the best damage to be doing against Devastator, but it really doesn't matter. Like, she just does so much damage that it's still going to be significant. She did 3.48 there. You can see what Superman's doing, and it's not anything close to what we're able to do with our Supergirl. 2.4 million on that one. The Flash comes in very handy with the Superman family team. You see Superman just did 877,000 there. We'll just keep cycling this ultimate as many times as we can. 4.28 million on that one. I think I got with Captain Cold, I was able to do a couple of 5 million ultimates with my Supergirl. I'm sure some whales have gotten much better results out of her, but that's just what I've been able to do. We're tracking to potentially beat our highest score, but we need a couple more ults out of our Supergirl to be able to do that. We might not get there. Here I don't think we're going to have enough time to click this button. I think we actually got it. So let's see what our score is there. It looks like it counted it. So 83 million, that is our highest damage that we've been able to do. And we'll take a look at the damage output. You can see that Flash was able to significantly increase Supergirl's damage over. I think I did my best score so far using the Captain Cold method was 36 million with Supergirl, but you end up getting some more damage output out of Superman. I think he did about 30 million with that one. So they're pretty comparable there. Now, let's go with something that might be a little bit more new player friendly. So let's say you're starting out on a new server, so you only really have access to Superman, who is the first bleed champion. So we're going to have to take out all these other really good champions off of the team, and you're probably going to start out with either Mira or Poison Ivy as your primary healer. Not a big fan of Mira. I do know that she is fairly good when you get her to red stars and nobody else on your team is well developed. But I think the better champion to invest a little bit of resources into early on in your account is going to be Poison Ivy. So we're going to throw Poison Ivy in here. I think another incredibly good free-to-play option for this boss is going to be Green Arrow, and I believe we have T-Spear equipped to Green Arrow. And then we'll go with our Captain Cold. And just because I want to make this as free-to-play friendly as possible, we're going to take Flash out. We'll throw in Cyborg, because Cyborg, really, I guess we could leave Flash in on this lineup, because Flash is fairly free-to-play accessible in terms of you really just need his ultimate in order to do most of what his kit is set up to do. But Cyborg works in much the same way, and actually Cyborg kind of does the same thing as Captain Cold. So what we're doing with this particular lineup is we're trying to supercharge both of these champions on the battlefield. We'll probably should move our Green Arrow a little bit further back, just so that he doesn't die super early on in the fight to an AoE. And we can run this one. Now, this is one that doesn't really require you to manually control anything. Obviously, I guess the one thing I would say is you probably want to make sure that you're ulting with Cyborg and Captain Cold before you ult with Green Arrow and Superman. But really, once the boss fight gets going, you kind of are going to have those static debuffs on the boss for the physical damage taken being increased. It's just going to be static for the rest of the fight. So you can kind of just let it run, and we should be able to get a decent amount of damage here. Obviously, if you're a new player, don't expect these crazy high scores. The first month or two that you're playing the game, actually, you're probably going to be seeing, a few 100,000 or maybe a couple million, maybe a little bit more than that if you really push on, just a handful of solid players and invest in them in their force and gear. Obviously, my champions here have a decent amount of investment in them. My Superman is pretty much maxed out at this point except for stars, so he's obviously going to be doing a ton of damage against this fight. But we'll finish this one out and we'll come back and you can take a look at the damage output whenever it's over. You can see we lost a decent amount. We lost all of our champions before the fight ended, which is fairly typical with some of these setups. Obviously, our healing wasn't the greatest there. If we take a look at our damage output, you can see that even though Superman ended up doing most of the work, we did get a significant amount of damage out of Green Arrow. And again, it's that single target damage that really, and particularly, we're supercharging physical damage dealt. So, any champion on the roster that's doing physical damage is going to see significant damage outlay here. Now, there are other lineups that you could run that might be a little bit more spiritual damage in nature, and maybe we could take a look at what that might look like here with one more fight for you. And this one's going to be centered around Justice League Dark and a couple of our Legion of Doom champions. So a little bit more investment here, but I would say definitely light spend is in the realm of possibility here. So what we're going to do is we're going to throw in Scarecrow as kind of a tank for the team. We'll definitely throw in our Constantine in the back line. We're going to use Raven as our healer. I'm going to use Sinestro. And then you kind of have two choices. So you can either go with maximizing your damage output and potentially having some of your champions die before the fight ends, or you could throw in Dr. Fate and try to keep everyone alive until the very end of the fight. Now, for purpose of this video, my Fate is much higher invested than my Zatanna. Zatanna's only 2 blue stars, so I think putting Dr. Fate in, ensuring that everyone gets those shields, and keeping your front line alive is going to allow our Constantine and Sinestro to do a little bit more damage to the boss. So we're going to run that, and we'll see what happens here. This is another example of a fight where auto is perfectly fine, but I do like to, even on auto, kind of make sure that my champions are getting their ults off as quickly as possible. And the other thing I'll say with this particular strategy is you're trying to supercharge your Constantine and Sinestro, and you'll do that because Sinestro and Scarecrow both have abilities that will amp spiritual damage. And obviously you're getting spiritual damage, just kind of a static amount of spiritual damage from having that 3-tag Justice League Dark synergy. So it ends up being fairly significant if you have high investment into your Sinestro and Constantine. Unfortunately, I only have I think I have Sinestro at 3 blue, and then I have Constantine at 3 purple, but they still end up doing a decent amount of damage for me. And we'll see if this team is able to beat that Superman kind of Justice League 3-tag team that we just ran a few minutes ago. I don't think it's going to have enough firepower here. Obviously, at a little bit more investment in my Superman than this team has. But I think at higher investment levels, like, at gold stars or red stars, a team like this would be, perfectly fine to run here, and you should get pretty decent damage output from it. Okay, so let's take a look at the damage meters. And you can see that the Constantine did, a significant amount of more damage than Sinestro did, but those are kind of your win conditions for this lineup. And then we can do one last team comp if you're big into Teen Titans and Bat Family. And then we can do one last team comp. Now, this one doesn't have as much tag synergy. You could throw in like a Batman or even a Red Robin maybe as a tank. Like, you need someone up front who's taking a lot of damage. But we're throwing Martian Manhunter in here. And again, this is probably a little bit more high investment team as well, but it's one that you can work toward, and it kind of uses like a hodgepodge. So you got some Bat Family champions in here. You got a couple of Justice League. You've got a couple of your Outsiders champions. You got Teen Titans. So, like, if you're doing kind of a mixed roster, you can make this team work, and it should work out fairly well, especially because they just did, I would say, a buff for Martian Manhunter's kit with Devastator. Previously, you weren't getting as much, like the counterattack damage was significantly lower previously. So now he's going, when he does his ult, it's going to bring up this counterattack damage, and you should see him doing a significant amount of damage. You'll see it pop up there. It just came up, like 221,000. So it's not like a lot of damage per tick, but it adds up because it's going to be happening a lot during the fight. And the key here is trying to keep your Nightwing alive. So obviously I would suspect that we're going to have some deaths before the end of the round. And one thing, a couple of people have pointed this out, and you see it just happen there, with like 45 seconds into the fight where Nightwing died. He doesn't take enough healing from your healers. I know there's some mechanics that are happening there, but basically when he jumps back behind the front lines, or jumps into the front line, I should say, he doesn't take, like, he goes out of range of the heals for a lot of your healers. So you got to watch out for that. We should still be able to do a significant amount of damage here. All right, let's take a look at the damage meters, and maybe we'll make one fine-tune adjustment to this team. So you can see Nightwing did most of the damage in that 45 seconds that he was alive. So we need to figure out a way to keep him alive a little bit longer. So one thing that we can do here is we can pull out the cyborg and we can add in Raven. So this does sacrifice some synergy, but it should keep our Nightwing alive for a little bit longer, and see if we can up those damage numbers. So probably skip to the end of the fight just for purposes of keeping this video a little bit shorter. But I'm, for the most part, going to be on auto, just making sure that as the ults come up, I'm clicking on those to make sure we're not missing out on a little bit of damage potential. And we'll come back and look at how everyone fared. So we're closing in on the end of this battle. You can see that we did lose Raven. She typically does end up dying in these fights towards the end. And we finally lost our Nightwing, but he was able to stay alive for a considerable amount longer this time around because we had the dual healer approach. And because of that, we were able to do significantly more damage than we did the first time around. And you can see that we basically doubled the amount of damage that Nightwing put out. So I think these fights are all about trying to kind of like play around with your roster and try to insert champions that you think are going to do well. You're trying to build around the synergies of your one win condition champion, and talked about a lot of I've talked about a lot of the options that you have, kind of the single target damage dealers that you want to focus on building your roster around for this boss fight. And a lot of those champions are ones that you're working to build for a lot of other game modes anyway. So, there's going to be a lot of synergy around that. Ultimately, a very straightforward fight, and I don't want to overcomplicate things. This was a fairly long video, but I think it's important to try to give people optionality for what they have at their disposal for some of these fights, and I tried to give you a decent amount of different options and show you how those teams actually perform. Obviously, you can tell that my roster is deficient for some of those teams, so you're going to see much better results from other folks who are running similar lineups. But you get the general gist of how the fight works, and you can kind of see some of that in action. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comments below if you've found any team comps that weren't mentioned in this video, or like whatever you're using, or maybe someone on your server has a really good team comp that you like. Drop that down in the comments below. It'll really help a lot of new players who are coming to this video looking for some guidance on how to do better against Devastator, especially those who are watching this video and are only in phase 1. You're trying to maximize those gem rewards from that phase and get to the second phase. Let's try to help each other out in the community and talk about some things that might be better than the ones that I'm recommending. There will be updated infographics for all the combat cycle bosses coming in the next month or two. I'm working with a team, and we're going to be trying to kind of come together and utilize all of our resources on these graphics to make them even better than the first round that I've put out. So be on the lookout for some of those collabs, and we'll try to get my Discord server filled up with some of those newer graphics as time goes by. If you haven't already done so, if you get enjoyment out of these videos, consider joining the channel as a member. You can do that down below, close to the description. You can also subscribe to the channel if you want to get notified anytime I put out new DC Dark Legion content. I've been making and trying to put out, somewhere between 2 and 4 videos a week on the game, and I'll continue to do that into the future. If you don't want to subscribe, perfectly fine, and I will see you in the next video.